One winter morning in 1985, snow blanketed the town of Cordova, Alaska, like a silent wall, and a man vanished into the white expanse without anyone knowing what had happened. Thomas Reilly, a dedicated forest ranger, left his log cabin by the woods to check the Powder Creek Trail and never returned. The search was conducted in desperation, his truck stuck in the storm, radio still on, but no trace of him. Decades passed, and that disappearance became a chilling legend, haunting all of Cordova, where people whispered about wild beasts, cracking ice, and a third man who was never found. Then in the spring of 2019, as the Powder Creek ice melted, pieces of a secret buried for nearly 4 decades began to emerge, leading to a truth no one dared to believe. Before we dive deeper into this shocking true story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you love journeys to uncover forgotten justice, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next part. In the winter of 1985, Cordova, a small bayside town in southern Alaska, was blanketed by snow so thick that every sound seemed swallowed whole. The air was bitterly cold, cutting to the bone, with wind from the Chugach Mountains carrying swirling patches of snow across the sparsely lit streets. In a wooden house near the edge of the forest, Tom Reilly, 44, a veteran forest ranger, was preparing for his routine patrol along the Powder Creek Trail. He'd done this job for over 10 years, knowing every twist and turn, every wooden bridge spanning the frozen creek. That afternoon, as the sky began to turn leaden gray, he packed his tool bag, camera, notebook and old radio. Diana Marsh, his girlfriend, stood on the porch, wrapped in a wool scarf around her neck, and asked if he should postpone the trip because of the bad weather. Tom just smiled, saying he'd only do a quick check of the northern trail section and be back before dark. The truck door slammed shut, the Ford F-150's engine rumbling to life amid the howling wind. The tires rolled slowly over the fresh snow, leaving 2 long tracks leading into the woods. About an hour later, clouds rolled in thick from the bay, signaling a snowstorm earlier than forecasted. The snow fell heavily, so fast it erased the tire tracks in just minutes. At the ranger station, the on-duty staff tried to make radio contact, but the signal faded to static. Diana sat by the fireplace, listening to the wind battering the window frames, occasionally trying to tune into Tom's channel, but to no avail. By 8 o'clock that evening, the town was engulfed in a dense white blur, the wind howling like metal scraping together. No one was out anymore, the roads were temporarily closed. When the clock neared 11, Diana peered out the window. The road to the house was just a faint ribbon of light. Tom's headlights should have appeared around the bend, reflecting through the snow, but nothing. A sense of unease crept in. She tried calling the ranger station again, only to hear the dispatcher say there was no signal from Powder Creek yet. The worry swelled into real fear. Tom was known for his caution, always checking in on time, never losing contact during all his years in the woods. Outside, the wind blew so hard it rattled the window frames. The clock passed midnight, the fire in the hearth, reduced to glowing embers. Diana threw on her coat, trembling as she picked up the phone to dial emergency. On the other end, the Cordova police dispatcher heard her voice choke. "Thomas Reilly hasn't come back, he's missing." The next morning, the snow still hadn't stopped. Cordova's sky was covered in a thick gray pallor, the weak light filtering through the heavy clouds making everything seem shrouded in a hazy veil. When the clock at the police station ticked past 8 a.m., the Cordova Police Department's initial response team, along with volunteer rescuers, was mobilized. On the way to Powder Creek Trail, they traveled in a convoy of 3 specialized trucks, warning lights flashing through the snowy mist. Police Chief Jim Bennett, who was coordinating and had worked with Tom for years, knew the terrain well and understood the man's discipline. "If Reilly didn't make it home, something serious happened," he said curtly as the group entered the trail area. When they reached the entrance to Powder Creek Trail, the snow was piled so deep it reached halfway up the tires. The rescuers had to shovel a temporary path to move forward. After nearly an hour of searching along the main route, they spotted Tom's dark green 1981 Ford F-150. The truck was stuck in the snow at the rear, the front end tilted slightly toward the forest, headlights off, doors not fully locked. A thin layer of ice coated the windows, showing it had been stationary since at least the previous afternoon. When they opened the door, police found the cab still containing a spare jacket, topographic map, Nikon FE camera, flashlight, and a stainless steel thermos with some cold liquid inside. The keys were still in the ignition. No signs of struggle, no skid marks, no blood, nothing damaged. The only notable thing was the footprints. A forensics officer bent close to the ground and noted 2 sets of boot prints matching the style and size of Reilly's patrol boots, leading away from the truck toward the northeast, along the forest edge. But after about 20 meters, the tracks vanished completely, buried under fresh snow from the night. No further direction could be traced. The tech team photographed the scene, marked GPS coordinates, and set up temporary barriers to secure the area. By midday, the wind picked up, the snow falling even heavier. Police split into 2 teams, one continued surveying the area around the truck, the other used snowmobiles to push deeper into the forest along the trail. After nearly 3 hours, they found only old animal signs, bear tracks, moose prints, but nothing human-related. A team used handheld sonar to scan a nearby small lake, but detected no unusual objects. Chief Bennett decided to set up a field command post at a clearing half a mile from the scene. A large map was spread across a truck hood, marking checked areas. He ordered the search radius expanded to 5 miles, calling in search dogs and a helicopter from the Alaska State Troopers in Anchorage. The chopper circled overhead, thermal cameras activated to detect unusual heat sources against the snow, but the results were 0. By afternoon, the light faded, forcing the search team back due to gusting winds and visibility down to a few meters. In the interim report sent to the Cordova station, Bennett noted, "Victim's vehicle found intact, no clear signs of foul play. Likely Reilly left the truck in heavy snow, became disoriented, and went missing." At home, Diana waited anxiously for news. Police came to take her initial statement, asking about Tom's habits, the time he left, and what he carried. She confirmed he only planned a short trail check, with no camping gear or food. This ruled out the possibility of him leaving voluntarily. That evening, the snow kept falling relentlessly. Under the yellow lights of the command post area, the rescue vehicles were caked in ice. Chief Bennett stared at the map, circling the truck's stuck position, and marking unapproachable forest areas in red ink. For now, he concluded, Tom Reilly had left the truck on foot, into the Powder Creek snow forest, and lost his trail in the blizzard. The search would resume the next morning, weather permitting. The wind had eased by the next morning, but snow still fell in thick flurries, making Cordova's dawn light look filtered through a white-gray curtain. Chief Jim Bennett arrived at the scene early, bringing case notes and a topographic map of the Powder Creek Trail area. After 2 days of fruitless searching, he knew this wasn't a simple accident. Tom Reilly was experienced. No one knew this terrain better. If he vanished on a familiar trail, something unusual had to have happened. In the field tent, 3 rescue teams gathered around a snow-dampened map table. Bennett had each report details, wind direction, vehicle position, boot prints, lake sonar results, and surveyed areas. A technician said the ice at the Powder Creek lake edge was thinner than usual, with a small crack several meters long, possibly from sudden temperature changes. But nothing was detected underneath. That crack was the first detail, making Bennett consider an icebreak accident. Tom might have left the truck, slipped toward the lake while trying to return, and been swept away by cold water under new ice. But he didn't rush to conclude. Those who'd worked with Tom insisted he knew how to move on ice, always checking thickness before stepping. Bennett scratched a note in his pad, insufficient basis, needs verification. The second hypothesis raised was animal attack. Another ranger said that winter, grizzly tracks had appeared in the Powder Creek area, wandering low for food. Search teams had also found bear prints near the forest edge, but no blood, fur or struggle marks around the truck. If Tom had been attacked, there'd be clearer evidence. Bennett ruled it out with a short note. No scene, no blood. The third possibility made him think longer. A third party involved. Tom's truck was untouched, wallet, camera and radio all there. No robbery signs. Yet the truck being left so neatly, lights off, keys in, door unlocked, suggested he hadn't left in panic, but in a controlled situation. Bennett asked the investigators, anyone else seen on the trail? A local resident, a mechanic nearby, said he'd heard another truck engine heading into the woods the previous afternoon, but hadn't seen the plates clearly. That vague detail was enough for Bennett to note, verify vehicles present afternoon of 12 halves. By day's end, he called a short briefing with the investigative team. On a whiteboard in the tent, Bennett wrote 3 bold lines: accident, fell through ice, animal attack, third party involved. Beside each was a list of inconsistencies and evidence to gather. We have no blood, no physical evidence, no witnesses. Don't rule out any possibility, he said, voice low. The staff continued combing, but results stayed empty. Search dogs only went a few hundred meters before losing the scent. The helicopter flew low along Power Creek, thermal sweeps wide but no heat sources. That night, wind rose again, forcing the search team to withdraw. At the Cordova station, Bennett sat alone with the interim file, staring at the red pen-marked map. He reassessed every fact: experienced missing person, left vehicle in bad conditions, no struggle signs, nothing unusual left behind, except boot prints. It didn't fit an accident, nor clear criminal behavior. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling something was off. The excessive quiet of the scene made everything suspicious. Before closing the day's report, Bennett typed the final line on the typewriter: missing cause unknown, ongoing investigation. The case was officially classified that way, opening a file that would haunt him for years to come. The fourth day of the search began in heavy silence. The sky over Cordova darkened, the dim light filtering through the thick veil of snow making the entire forest around Power Creek seem swallowed up. Sheriff Jim Bennett stood before the map spread out on the car's hood, pointing to the areas circled in red: the entire trail corridor, the northern forest strip, and the small lake at the end of the valley. No clues, no signals. He ordered the search perimeter expanded by another 5 miles to the east, toward the area that could lead to Sutton Ridge, where the terrain was rugged and prone to collapsing ice crevices. 3 helicopters from the Alaska State Troopers were dispatched, each carrying flare infrared camera equipment and specialized search personnel. On the ground, 6 teams of working dogs began a new trek, starting from the location of Tom Reilly's vehicle. They moved in a line, each team spaced several hundred meters apart, maintaining radio contact. The temperature had dropped below 15 degrees below zero, and the heavy snowfall made tracking difficult. The only trace left from the first day, the boot prints heading northeast, had now completely vanished. The helicopters flew low along the mountainsides, infrared lenses scanning every patch of forest for unusual heat sources. The screens showed only cold colors, no signs of human presence. By late morning, one rescue team reported they had discovered a small open water area at the edge of Power Creek Lake, where the ice surface had broken in a semicircular shape. The forensics team immediately headed there, bringing a lake sonar machine. The scan results showed ice thicker than 20 inches, with no large objects underneath. The area was marked and photographed, but it could not be confirmed as the site of an accident. As the light began to fade, another team moving along the shallow stream at the southern end of the lake discovered a strange object, a nylon bag caught by the wind, snagged between 2 low tree stumps, torn halfway open at the mouth. Faded print on the bag read Sutton Auto, Cordova, Alaska, a local auto shop just a few miles away. Bennett immediately ordered the bag sealed, photographed, and sent back to the command center. Inside, there was nothing but a few grains of dirty sand and an old piece of adhesive tape. However, the detail about Sutton Auto caught many people's attention. Tom Reilly had once mentioned the place in connection with repairing his camera. The technical team checked around the area where the nylon bag was found, but discovered no other items. No slide marks, no human signs. It was possible the bag had been blown up from the nearby residential area by the wind, or someone had been there before the storm hit. Bennett didn't rush to conclusions. He noted in his log, "Nylon bag, unconfirmed connection to victim. Retain as preliminary evidence." By afternoon, the wind began to pick up. Gusts of cold air from Prince William Sound swept across the lake, dragging swirling ribbons of snow like smoke. The helicopters had to turn back as visibility dropped to less than 200 meters. The working dogs lost their bearings due to the constantly shifting winds. One rescue worker nearly suffered hypothermia after falling into a snowdrift. Bennett decided to suspend the wide area search, keeping only the team monitoring the vehicle and lake areas. In the command tent, everyone warmed their hands by the portable gas stove. On the table, the map was crisscrossed with red pen marks and pushpins. Bennett marked the location where the nylon bag was found, then connected it with a dotted line to where the vehicle had been discovered. The 2 points were nearly half a mile apart, enough to raise questions about Tom's direction of travel, if he had indeed been on foot. But that route also led toward Sutton Ridge, an area of dangerous terrain that few people visited. He quietly pondered, then circled it as the priority search area for the next phase. Late in the afternoon, the search teams returned. Over the radio, the final update crackled dryly. No signs of life detected, no heat sources, no new objects. At that moment, the second blizzard of the week began to form. The weather forecast warned of gale-force winds and record snowfall amounts overnight. Bennett was forced to order a full halt to operations. The units packed up equipment and moved away from the lake area before the weather fully froze everything in place. Before leaving the scene, he turned back to look at the forest shrouded in darkness. Tom Reilly's vehicle still sat motionless at the roadside, covered in a layer of snow more than a foot thick. The rescue vehicle lights reflected dimly on the ice surface, casting lonely streaks of light amid the snowy wind. There were no signs that a human had ever been there, except for a few marker stakes from the forensics team. Everything returned to the cold silence of Alaska. The day's report ended with a brief line, "No body or signs of life discovered." One unidentified origin item of evidence, nylon bag printed with Sutton Auto logo recovered. Search operations suspended due to extreme weather conditions. Throughout that night, the blizzard swept through Cordova, burying the entire Powder Creek area under a new layer of thick snow, erasing whatever remnants remained of the 4 fruitless days of searching. That blizzard was the last of the 1985 winter season, but it also buried forever any traces left of Thomas Reilly. When the snow melted in March, the rescue team returned to the Powder Creek Trail area to resume the search, but the landscape was no different from virgin territory. The ground was flat and smooth, with no more stakes, no more tire ruts, only exposed ice and tree roots beneath the melting snow. They scanned the entire lake area with sonar, tested dives in suspicious spots, but found no objects. The nylon bag printed with the Sutton Auto logo remained the only piece of evidence, meaningless and of undetermined origin. After 2 weeks with no progress, Sheriff Jim Bennett was forced to order the operation terminated. The final report of 1985 was recorded in dry, cold language. No body discovered, no new evidence, no clear criminal evidence. The case was officially classified as unexplained disappearance and handed over to the Alaska State Troopers for periodic monitoring. A copy of the file was stored in the Anchorage archives, numbered #85 2145R. The name Reilly, Thomas J., was tagged red, indicating an open but inactive file. Cordova returned to its normal rhythm of life, but Tom's absence remained an unspeakable void in the small community. He had been the friendly one, involved in rescues, teaching martial arts to kids, always there when the town faced hardships. People mourned him, but time faded the memories. By the following summer, A wooden sign bearing the name Reilly Point was temporarily erected along the trail, a gesture of remembrance. Diana Marsh stayed in Cordova for nearly another year, living in the small house overlooking the bay. Every morning, she still passed the ranger station, gazing toward the snowy forest where Tom had vanished. When the next winter arrived, she packed her things, left the town, and moved to Anchorage to work for the state library. Though she no longer stayed, she still sent regular letters to the investigative agency each year, asking if there was any new information. The replies were always the same: no further discoveries. In the 1990s, investigative technology was still insufficient to handle cases like Reilly's. DNA had not yet been widely applied in Alaska, and the collected samples were all sealed in plastic bags, labeled with red stamps, "Do not test contamination risk." In 1993, the state investigative agency conducted an inventory of all cold case files, and Reilly was categorized under missing person, no body, no suspect. The evidence included topographic map, Nikon camera, flashlight, coffee thermos, and Sutton Auto nylon bag. They were sealed in a cardboard box, numbered evidence box 2145 R3, and transferred to the Central Storage Warehouse in Anchorage. By the early 2000s, the cold case unit was formally established within the Alaska State Troopers structure. Many old missing persons cases were reviewed, but priority went to those with witnesses or clear suspects. The Reilly case, lacking a body, direct evidence or forensic reports, was once again overlooked. In 2007, an administrative staffer noted in the inventory log, "No active leads, archive indefinitely." The file was pushed deeper into the metal shelves, among hundreds of old case boxes. Over more than 3 decades, Thomas Reilly's name was mentioned only a few times. Each winter, older rangers told the story to new recruits about the colleague who vanished in the blizzard. No one knew for sure what had happened. Only a few hypotheses passed down orally: falling into the lake, getting lost, or being harmed and buried under the ice. Everything became mere rumor. In Anchorage, Diana still kept a small box containing Tom's belongings, a photo of them together at Power Creek, the wool scarf he left behind, and a copy of the missing persons report she obtained from the Cordova police. She never married, nor did she return to Cordova. Over time, the case became a short line in the long list of unresolved names in Alaska. By the end of 2017, when the state's cold case unit began the digital conversion project to digitize old files, a young technician discovered the dusty Reilly file, sealed away for more than 30 years. He flipped through the yellowed typed pages, pausing at the note nylon bag printed with Sutton Auto logo, undetermined origin. That line, by chance, would become the starting point for the awakening of a case thought to be forever buried in the ice. The Thomas Reilly file officially lay dormant in the Alaska State Troopers archives for more than 3 decades, one of hundreds of disappearances swallowed by time, awaiting the day when technology and human persistence were enough to pull it back into the light. Early in 2018, Alaska experienced an unusual winter: temperatures higher than average, early ice melt, and constant rain that left many areas in Anchorage shrouded in fog. In the old Alaska State Troopers Administrative Building, the 3rd floor was dedicated to the cold case unit, where seemingly dead cases were given new life through modern investigative technologies. One morning in early February, as the digital conversion project entered its final phase, a list of unsolved files over 30 years old was sent up for another screening. On that list, file number #85-2145R, Thomas Reilly, missing person, Cordova, 1985 appeared, with the note, "Original evidence present, good preservation condition." Lieutenant Nora Pike, a new investigator transferred from the Anchorage Crime Investigation Division to the Cold Case Unit, was assigned to conduct a preliminary review of this file. Pike was in her 30s, with experience in forensics and long-term missing persons cases. She spent her first afternoon reading the entire Reilly file, 47 old typed pages, blurry scene photos, and a few brief statements. The section that caught her attention most was Evidence Box 2145 R3, listing the items: topographic map, Nikon camera, flashlight, coffee thermos, and nylon bag printed with Sutton Auto logo. No biological samples, no DNA, no forensic reports. Pike went down to the basement storage room, where the case boxes were shelved by year. Box 2145 R3 was in the fourth row, covered in a thin layer of dust. She brought it up to the examination room and opened the seal for the first time in more than 3 decades. The items inside were still intact in old plastic bags, with yellowed paper labels. When she lifted the nylon bag, she noticed the print Sutton Auto, Cordova, Alaska was still clearly readable. A small detail at the bag's corner caught her eye, a diagonal tear as if it had been ripped forcefully, with the edge stuck with dark brown residue, possibly mud or dried blood. She contacted the Anchorage Forensics Lab to inquire about DNA analysis possibilities on old evidence. The expert said that with the new touch DNA technology, even residual epithelial cells could be extracted for traces. Pike decided to file a request to re-examine all evidence in the Reilly case. The dried mud sample from the bag's corner was sent to the state lab in Palmer for preliminary testing. In parallel, Pike began reviewing the old timelines. She compared the 1985 investigation statements and the operation closure report. In the witness statements, there was mention of a mechanic named Glenn Sutton, owner of Sutton Auto, who had been questioned but not considered a suspect. The reason for exclusion at the time was simple: no physical evidence, no confirming witnesses. Pike underlined his name in her notebook and highlighted in red the note, "Last seen area, Power Creek, Sutton Ridge." The following week, the forensics lab sent back initial results. The nylon bag had traces of male DNA, though not enough for identification with old technology. Still, they confirmed it could be analyzed using the new YSTR sequencing method, a technique that the private lab in Virginia, Parabon Nano Labs, had successfully applied in many other cold cases. Pike submitted the report to her commander, proposing collaboration with Parabon for genetic genealogy testing. The proposal was approved after 3 days. While awaiting results, Pike screened the 1985 Cordova archives, newspaper clippings, rescue personnel lists, and weather reports. She noticed a detail that had never been emphasized: the location where the Sutton Auto nylon bag was found was nearly half a mile from Reilly's vehicle, in an area where winds typically blew against the trail direction. That meant if the bag had been carried by the wind, the travel direction didn't match. It was more likely it had fallen from someone leaving the scene in the opposite direction. Early in April, results from Parabon Nano Labs arrived. The DNA sample was identified as belonging to a Northern European lineage, with potential ties to the Sutton family, a line originating from Wisconsin that migrated to Alaska in the late 1970s. The accompanying report included a simulated facial image of the DNA contributor, a male, dark red hair, approximately 35-40 years old in 1985. The name Sutton appeared once more, now no longer coincidental. Pike presented the results to her superiors. She planned the second step: verify descendants of the Sutton family in Cordova, trace information on Glenn Sutton, who had once owned the auto shop matching the logo on the nylon bag. Old business records showed Sutton Auto operated from 1980 to 1992, after which it closed when the owner moved elsewhere. No current address, no phone number. Before leaving the office that day, Pike pinned a handwritten note to the workboard: Reilly case reopened, possible forensic lead, Sutton family. The file, thought dead after 33 years, was officially reactivated. In the chilly room of the cold case unit,
The neon lights reflected off the old 1985 photos, where a man had vanished into the white snow of Cordova, and a name faded on a nylon bag began to come into focus again.
In April 2019, spring arrived earlier than usual in southern Alaska. After weeks of rising temperatures, the old ice layers around Power Creek Lake began to melt, and murky gray water rushed down the valley from the mountainsides. The local ranger team, in coordination with dispatched environmental staff, surveyed the lake area, noting ice slides and rechecking locations marked during the Thomas Reilly case. The town of Cordova had nearly forgotten the disappearance, but for investigator Nora Pike, this lake was now the focus of the reinvestigation. After the report confirming DNA matching the Sutton family line was verified, she decided to head directly to Power Creek to survey the old scene. On April 12, Pike, along with 2 forensic technicians from Anchorage, followed the trail that had led to the discovery of Reilly's car in 1985. Damp wind blew through the forest, and the melting ice surface revealed patches of murky gray water. At the southern edge of the lake, under the roots of an uprooted old pine tree, one member of the group spotted an unusual object caught between the roots and the mud. As they approached, they realized it was a rotten canvas bag, its zipper rusted, nearly covered by mud and moss. The technician carefully extracted it from the ice and placed it in a sealed box. On site, they took photos, recorded GPS coordinates, and then sent the entire sample to the Anchorage lab for examination. 3 days later, in the lab, the bag was dried and opened under a fume hood. Inside were 3 items: a roll of unprocessed 35 mm film, a medical bandage stained with dried blood, and a crumpled small piece of paper written in blue ballpoint pen. 5:30 p.m. Sutton Ard. There were no other identifying marks. Under the microscope, the dried blood on the bandage was still sufficient for DNA extraction. This sample was immediately sent to the Palmer lab for preliminary analysis. While awaiting results, Pike examined the discovery site of the bag. She compared it to the old maps from the 1985 search operation. This location was near the eastern end of the lake, about 400 meters from where the Sutton Auto nylon bag had been found. If both bags were related, it was possible that someone had moved along the lake shore, dropping or intentionally leaving them while withdrawing from the scene. Notably, the spring water flow always ran from west to east, meaning the canvas bag couldn't have drifted from the Reilly vehicle area to this spot. It must have been placed there before the lake froze. A week later, the DNA analysis results from the bandage arrived: male DNA, not matching the DNA of Thomas Reilly, taken from old personal effects. This confirmed that at least one other man had been present at the scene. The genetic group analysis showed Northern European origins, with the same haplogroup that Parabon Nanolabs had identified in the 1985 nylon bag sample. Pike knew she was on the right track. She immediately went to Cordova to check local records. Although the Sutton Auto shop had long closed, the business registration files were still stored in the Valdez Cordova Borough database. According to the old license, the owner was Glenn M. Sutton, born in 1946, who had lived in Cordova until the early 1990s before moving elsewhere. Pike sent a request to trace his residence, and learned that Sutton now lived in Anchorage, less than 30 miles from her office. That name was no longer a faint line in old records, but a clear investigation target. While waiting for the re-examination order, Pike continued to process the film roll recovered from the canvas bag. The Anchorage Imaging Lab used a special chemical recovery process to develop the decayed film. Some frames were damaged by water, but at the end of the roll, 4 photos remained clear: snowy landscape shots, a lake corner, and in the 4th, blurry but recognizable, the tail of a red pickup truck, half buried in snow, parked near the lake edge. The light data indicated the photo was taken in the afternoon, with low sun angle, matching the note on the paper scrap. 5:30 p.m. Sutton Ard. Further analysis using historical photo matching software showed that the truck tail matched the 1982 Ford F-Series model, the same type that Glenn Sutton had registered ownership of, according to state DMV records. This finding was noted in an internal report and sent to command. On May 3, the Thomas Reilly case was officially reclassified in the state's investigation system from missing person to suspicious death investigation. In the meeting with command, Pike presented the entire progression, new evidence, DNA results, imaging leads, and direct ties to the Sutton family. Superiors approved a full criminal investigation order, granting Pike oversight of the case. After 34 years buried in archive files, the Powder Creek disappearance was no longer a story of snow and memories. It had become an official criminal case, with the first physical clues leading to a specific name, Glenn Sutton, who could be the key to unlocking the entire truth frozen for over 3 decades. As the case was reclassified as a criminal matter, investigator Nora Pike knew the next step had to rely entirely on science. In early May 2019, she sent the DNA sample from the bandage found in the canvas bag to Parabon Nano Labs, the Virginia lab specializing in forensic genetic genealogy. At the same time, she attached a reference DNA sample from Thomas Reilly, extracted from old personal effects, to rule out any mix-up. All procedures were strictly sealed and shipped by air. While awaiting results, Pike continued recovering the 35mm film from the bag. The frames were heavily damaged, but thanks to infrared scanning and contrast enhancement techniques, they restored one nearly complete shot. The tail of a red pickup truck, half buried in snow, parked right at the edge of Powder Creek Lake. Light analysis showed the photo was taken around 5:30 p.m., matching the note 5:30 p.m., Sutton Ard, on the paper. In the blurry corner of the photo, the shadow of a man standing several meters away was visible. In mid-June, Parabon sent back preliminary results. The DNA on the bandage belonged to a male in Y haplogroup, I1 Northern European origin. The same genetic type found on the Sutton Auto nylon bag collected in 1985. GED-matched genealogy data pointed to a rare gene sequence matching the Sutton family, originating from Wisconsin and moving to Alaska in the late 1970s. The report included a DNA phenotyping facial reconstruction, a man approximately 35-40 years old, with dark red hair and green eyes. In an internal Alaska State Troopers meeting, Pike presented that 2 independent pieces of evidence from different time periods, both pointed to the same family line. The truck tail in the restored photo matched the 1980-1982 Ford F-Series model that Glenn M. Sutton, owner of the Sutton Auto Mechanic Shop, had registered. This could not be coincidence. Superiors allowed Pike to expand the investigation in the direction of forensic genealogy and direct collaboration with genealogy expert Dr. Alan Rhodes at Parabon. The team began building an expanded family tree from public data. After 3 weeks, they identified 3 individuals with matching genes, all from a Sutton branch in Wisconsin. One of them was a cousin of Glenn Sutton, now living in Minnesota. The results strengthened the suspicion that the person who left the DNA at the scene had direct blood relation to Glenn. Pike simultaneously traced Sutton's personal records in Alaska. Archival data showed he had been arrested for assault in 1974 in Wisconsin, then moved to Cordova in 1978, opened a small mechanic shop, and left in 1992. The shop bore the exact name Sutton Auto on the nylon bag collected at the scene. The evidence was beginning to form a seamless chain. By late July, Parabon completed the full genealogy report. The DNA sample matched 99.98% with Glenn M. Sutton's direct line. When the suspect's facial reconstruction was placed next to a 1984 photo of Sutton, the similarity was nearly absolute. Pike felt that the 34-year-old case finally had a true face. She filed the report with the district prosecutor, requesting a surveillance warrant and a sample of Sutton's DNA for confirmation. At the same time, she asked the court to retrieve his vehicle records from the 1980s to verify the red Ford F-150 that appeared in the photo. The warrants were approved within a week. In midsummer, Pike returned to Powder Creek to check the location in the restored photo. The lake surface was now fully melted, the shore exposing layers of brown-gray mud. She stood where the truck had once been parked, imagining the 1985 scene, a man vanishing into the white snow, with the only trace being a nylon bag bearing the name of the shop of the man he might have met that afternoon. On August 2, 2019, Pike signed an 11-page comprehensive report, sent to command with the concluding line, "Genetic genealogy results confirm direct ties to Glenn M. Sutton. Recommend deployment of surveillance and confirmatory DNA collection." 34 years after Thomas Reilly's disappearance, investigator Nora Pike finally had in her hands the first scientific evidence connecting all the pieces: DNA, images, and the red truck by Powder Creek Lake, all leading back to one man who had once lived quietly in the same community where the victim vanished. 1,000 words after the genetic genealogy report from Parabon Nanolabs confirmed the direct link between the DNA sample and the Sutton family line. Investigator Nora Pike focused on cross-referencing timelines and witnesses to turn the chain of scientific evidence into legal grounds. She started with the restored photo from the 35mm film, the only one with locational value. The Anchorage Imaging Analysis Unit, in coordination with the NOAA Meteorological Agency, used SunCalc software to determine the capture time based on shadow direction and sun angle. The results showed the photo was taken between 5:25–5:40 p.m. on February 12, 1985, right in the window when Thomas Reilly lost contact. The original weather records also noted thin cloudy skies and dim light, perfectly matching the estimated time. In more detailed analysis, the technical team identified the truck in the photo as a 1980–1982 Ford F-Series, based on tail light and bed trim features. When Pike checked the Alaska Vehicle Registration Database for 1983–1986, only 2 people in Cordova owned that model: Glenn M. Sutton, owner of Sutton Auto, and a road repair worker named William Harker, who had passed away and had an alibi. This made the truck in the photo almost certainly Sutton's. From this result, Pike conducted a review of witness records. In the original 1985 statement, Sheriff Jim Bennett had noted that a resident heard a truck near Sutton Ridge around 6 p.m. No specific name, but the list of participants in the initial search was still on file. Among those names was Harold Cole, then a ranger overseeing the eastern Cordova forest area, now retired and living in Palmer. Pike decided to meet him in person to verify. Cole greeted her in his small log cabin amid the pine forest. He remembered that snowstorm night very clearly. When Pike showed him the restored photo, he confirmed recognizing the area in the image. Then he recounted, "I was heading back to the station around 6 and saw red truck lights toward the lake. The driver was wearing a thick red coat with a hood. I thought about approaching, but the wind was strong and the snow too thick to see. When I looked back, the truck was gone." Cole had never detailed this because he thought it unrelated at the time. Pike asked if he was sure about the coat color. Cole replied immediately, "Bright red, the ski jacket type. In Cordova back then, only a few people had that kind. Glenn Sutton was one of them." He also recalled that red truck had a loud engine rumble, different from Reilly's. The account matched Sutton's Ford F-150 model. Pike recorded the entire testimony and prepared an official witness statement. This was the first confirmation of another person present at Powder Creek on the evening Reilly vanished. Back in Anchorage, Pike checked Sutton Auto inventory records. A January 1985 invoice showed the shop had imported a batch of red uniform coats for employees, matching Cole's description detail. She also reviewed bank transaction data and discovered a fuel payment receipt on February 13, 1985, at Cordova North Gas Station, just a few miles from Powder Creek, in Glenn Sutton's name. The transaction occurred right after Reilly's disappearance. Pike compiled all the data in a report sent to superiors. Photo capture time confirmed 5:25, 5:40 p.m.,
matching loss of contact. Truck and photo matches Sutton's model and color. Witness saw person in red coat at Power Creek in the same time frame. Financial data confirms Sutton's presence near the area immediately after the incident. Genetic genealogy matches Sutton direct line. The report concluded independent elements, DNA, imaging, witnesses, and supporting data all converge on the same subject. The Cold Case Unit commander approved the request for a secret surveillance warrant on Glenn Sutton and direct DNA sample collection for absolute matching. As she left the office that night, Pike looked back at the investigation board, black and white photos, Power Creek maps, the note missing February 12, 1985. After more than 30 years, the faint details in the old files had connected into a complete logical chain. Sutton, the man who had once been just a blurry name in the 1985 report, was now at the center of the investigation, with evidence strong enough to pave the way for the next action phase.
Early in 2020, Nora Pike received an order authorizing the secret surveillance of Glenn M. Sutton, a man to whom genetic evidence, images, and witness testimonies all pointed to the same conclusion. According to resident records, Sutton was 75 years old at the time, living with his wife in a small house in the suburbs of Anchorage, about 10 miles from downtown. He ran an old machine repair shop behind the house and was still seen by neighbors as a quiet, reticent, somewhat reclusive man. To those unaware of Cordova's past in 1985, he was just an elderly retired mechanic living quietly amid Alaska's white snow. Pike assembled a surveillance team of 3, a technical agent, a movement tracker, and herself as direct commander. They parked a discreet vehicle in front of the grocery store where Sutton often stopped for morning coffee, logging his daily routines. Over the first 2 weeks, Sutton adhered to a nearly fixed schedule, leaving home at 7 a.m., stopping at the Holiday Station store gas station at the corner of Northern Lights Boulevard, buying coffee, then driving to the machine shop. Every Friday morning, he lingered longer, sitting at the outdoor table, drinking half the coffee before leaving the rest. That was the opportunity Pike had been waiting for. On February 14, 2020, exactly 35 years after Thomas Reilly's disappearance, the surveillance team collected a sample. As Sutton left the gas station, a technician entered, retrieving the paper coffee cup he had discarded in the trash, sealing it per forensic protocol. Pike took the sample to the Anchorage lab that same day, requesting DNA testing and direct comparison to the biological sample collected from the bandage in 2019. The results returned after 4 days left the entire cold case unit silent for a few seconds, a perfect match. The DNA from the rim of the coffee cup matched 100% with the male DNA obtained from the bandage in the Power Creek canvas bag, as well as with the Sutton family lineage, identified by Parabon Nanolabs. That meant Glenn Sutton was not just blood-related, he was the one who had left the DNA at the 1985 crime scene. Pike immediately sent the report to her commander. In the internal memo, she wrote, S-tar and Y-S-tar comparisons are a complete match. Random match probability, 1 in 1 billion. DNA sample proves the direct presence of Glenn M. Sutton at Power Creek at the time of the crime. The news spread quickly through the state investigative community. After more than 3 decades, a no-body disappearance case finally had a real suspect. However, Pike understood that collecting the sample from the coffee cup was an indirect collection and could not be used as sole evidence in court without a proper search warrant and an official reference sample. In the following days, the surveillance team continued to monitor Sutton cautiously. He drove an old silver-gray pickup truck, often going to buy supplies at the nearby market before returning to the shop. No suspicious behavior, but occasionally he glanced around when leaving the store, as if sensing someone watching. Pike ordered a reduction in personnel to avoid detection. She simultaneously began preparing the affidavit for a search warrant and direct DNA sample collection order. In the affidavit, she attached all the evidence, genetic genealogy results from Parabon 2019, light and image analysis, showing Sutton's vehicle at Power Creek on the afternoon of February 12, 1985. Testimony of witness Harold Cole, affirming he saw a man in a red jacket in the area. DNA comparison report between the bandage and the coffee cup, 2020. Summary conclusion: there is probable cause to determine that Glenn M. Sutton was present at the scene and may be directly involved in the death of Thomas Reilly. Before submitting to the district attorney, Pike reviewed the potential rebuttals with legal counsel. They anticipated defense attorneys arguing that collecting the sample from the coffee cup violated privacy rights. But under U.S. Supreme Court precedent, California v. Greenwood, 1988, items discarded in public places are no longer protected by those rights. This strengthened the warrant affidavit. Mid-March, the team received supplemental news from the gas station. Security footage captured Sutton stopping for coffee on the exact day of the sample collection. The images clearly showed his face, proving the DNA sample's origin. Pike archived the full video, copying it to a sealed hard drive, treating it as supporting evidence. While awaiting court approval, Pike spent time reviewing old files. She looked at the black and white photo of Power Creek from 1985, where snow blanketed everything and rescuers planted stakes in a futile search. Below the photo, faded typed text read, "No body recovered." Now that line was about to be replaced. On March 18, 2020, the Anchorage District Attorney's Office signed off on the search warrant for Sutton's home and official biological sample collection. In the court filing, Pike's closing statement was just one sentence: the DNA on the bandage, the sole remaining physical evidence from 1985, has found its owner. After 35 years, the Thomas Reilly case had crossed the threshold to resolution. With the perfect DNA match and search warrant in hand, Nora Pike and the investigative team prepared to open the next phase: direct confrontation with the man whose traces had been buried deep under Power Creek's ice for half a century of cold silence. Right after the search warrant was approved, Nora Pike and the forensics team entered the pivotal phase, reconstructing the 1985 disappearance scene using 3D simulation technology. Their goal was to determine what really happened at Power Creek and prove that Thomas Reilly's death was no accident. Pike contacted the NOAA Alaska Region's forensic mapping team to gather terrain, meteorological, and satellite imagery data for Cordova in February 1985. From old radar logs, they built a detailed model of the Sutton Ridge area and the Power Creek Lake shore, where Reilly's vehicle and evidence items were found. The map clearly displayed terrain slopes, ice thickness, wind direction, and temperatures on February 12, 1985, enabling an accurate simulation of the conditions at the time of the incident. 3 weeks later, the complete 3D model was projected in the Anchorage analysis room. Under simulated lighting, the scene unfolded like a reenactment of the moment Reilly vanished. The frozen lake surface tilted at about 20 degrees, 10 inches thick, with a gently sloping south shore. The technical team ran multiple scenarios: Reilly slipping on his own, natural ice cracking, or someone pushing. The results showed that in the first two scenarios, body center of gravity and wind force were insufficient to cause a fall. Only when adding a light push of about 35 newtons, equivalent to an adult hand's force, did the model show the victim sliding more than 3 meters before falling into the thin ice area. Pike noted in the report, a light push alone could cause the victim to slide and fall through the thin ice layer, with no chance of self-rescue. This finding strongly bolstered the altercation leading to fall hypothesis she had long suspected. To verify, the forensics team conducted a field experiment under similar conditions. A man of the same build as Reilly was fitted with motion sensors. When lightly pushed from behind, he immediately slid nearly 4 meters before falling through thin ice. The results matched the computer model perfectly. She cross-referenced this data with Glenn Sutton's old statement: Reilly headed toward the lake alone as the wind picked up. At the time in 1985, Only someone present at the scene would know the direction Reilly was moving. That seemingly innocuous remark now became a damning detail. From the 3D model, Pike reconstructed the most likely sequence of events. On the afternoon of February 12, 1985, Reilly met Sutton in the Sutton Ridge area, possibly to discuss camera repairs. The two walked along the Power Creek lakeshore, where an argument ensued. Sutton pushed Reilly, causing him to fall onto the sloped ice, slide into the thin ice area, and drown. Afterward, Sutton left the scene, discarding the nylon bag and canvas bag, evidence items found later. When compared to the evidence map, Pike realized the 1985 nylon bag discovery site, the 2019 canvas bag site, and the old cracked ice fissure all lay on the same eastward slide path. Exactly the direction the simulation predicted the victim would fall. Every detail began to fit like completing puzzle pieces. The forensics team's technical report was presented to the Alaska State Troopers. No possibility of the victim falling due to natural ice cracking. High likelihood due to external force impact. Terrain and meteorological data support the altercation hypothesis. The Anchorage prosecutors quickly viewed this as crucial supplemental evidence for an arrest warrant. They needed to prove Sutton's actions were intentional, not accidental. Pike drafted a brief summary. Given the 1985 slope and ice conditions, a light push alone was sufficient to cause death. The suspect was the only one present, confirmed by DNA and imagery. As the meeting ended, the screen still displayed the 3D model, a small figure sliding across the ice surface before vanishing under the cold water. No one in the room said anything. The scene was too real, too clear. Pike stood silently for a moment, then closed the file thicker than 400 pages, adding the final conclusion line, altercation leading to fall hypothesis confirmed at 97% confidence level. The scene reconstruction not only proved how Thomas Reilly met his end, but also clearly defined the incident's nature, an intentional act concealed under time's blanket of snow. With those results, Nora Pike had the final piece of evidence to move to the next step, arresting Glenn M. Sutton, the man who had carried Power Creek's secret for 35 years. Early February 2021, after the scene simulation report was approved, Nora Pike filed for an arrest and search warrant against Glenn M. Sutton. The hundreds of pages thick file included the matching DNA results, witness testimonies, red truck images, and the 3D model proving the push. On February 8, the Anchorage judge signed the warrant. After more than 3 decades, Thomas Reilly's disappearance officially had a suspect. On the morning of February 10, fog blanketed the Anchorage suburbs. The Alaska State Troopers Task Force quietly approached Sutton's wooden house. As he opened the machine shop door, 2 officers stepped forward, reading the arrest warrant. He only had time to ask, "This about Reilly again?" before falling silent, offering no resistance. Searching the house and machine shop, the forensics team seized a red jacket, an old leather notebook, and a .22 caliber handgun. The jacket was faded, but still bore the label Sutton Auto Workwear 1985, matching witness Harold Cole's description. In the notebook, a crossed-out line read, 2/12, meet Tom, camera, Lake. The .22 handgun had its serial number worn off, found in a drawer under the workbench. All items were sealed and transported to the lab. At the Alaska State Troopers headquarters, Sutton was interrogated. He admitted knowing Reilly on a casual basis, saying the victim had visited the shop for camera repairs. Regarding February 12, 1985, he claimed he only met to check the equipment before leaving before dark. When Pike presented the evidence, matching DNA, red truck photos, witness testimony and notebook, he calmly said, "You're looking at the wrong guy. I didn't hurt anyone." Sutton's calm demeanor did not faze Pike. The lab quickly confirmed DNA on the red jacket, matched the bandage and coffee cup samples. Machine oil smells,
and pocket dust indicated it had been stored for years, not recently tampered with. The notebook's handwriting was forensically matched, aligning perfectly with Sutton's 1985 administrative signature. Though the .22 handgun was not directly linked to Reilly's death, the erased serial number added a charge of illegal firearm possession. On February 12, 2021, exactly 36 years after the disappearance, the district attorney held a brief press conference. Glenn M. Sutton, 75 of Anchorage, has been arrested and charged in connection with the 1985 death of Forest Service employee Thomas Reilly. The investigation utilized modern DNA technology and scene simulation. The news spread across Alaska. Media called it one of the longest cold cases cracked by genetic technology. While the press buzzed, Pike stayed in the office, reviewing the interrogation video. At the end, Sutton looked up, straight into the camera, and murmured, "You think Snow doesn't know how to hide?" That remark only made her more certain. 36 years of silence had ended. The evidence, the jacket, notebook, DNA, had spoken for everything. The next afternoon, Pike signed the summary, sent to the prosecutor. Suspect Glenn M. Sutton is in custody. Statements contradict physical evidence. Sufficient grounds for prosecution on manslaughter and evidence tampering charges. In the cold end of winter wind, the investigative team watched the truck carrying the suspect leave headquarters. On the case file board, the line Reilly, missing 1,985 inches, was crossed out and replaced with a single word, arrested.
The second interrogation with Glenn M. Sutton was held 2 days after his arrest. This time, investigator Nora Pike directly led it. The interrogation room was small, with white light reflecting off the cold metal table. Sutton sat opposite, his hands stacked on top of each other, his gaze calm but showing signs of fatigue. In front of him was a thick file containing all the evidence collected: DNA results, crime scene photos, notebook, red jacket. Pike began in an even and slow voice. "Mr. Sutton, I want you to recount in detail the afternoon of February 12, 1985. Were you at Power Creek?" Sutton looked up, his eyes motionless for a few seconds before nodding. "I was there. But not like you think. Tom came looking for me first." He recounted that on that day, Reilly had brought a malfunctioning Nikon camera and arranged to meet him at Sutton Ridge, near the entrance to the Power Creek Trail, to ask for help checking it. According to Sutton, they met around 5 p.m., when the light was still dim. He said he wanted to take a few shots of the lake before sunset. "I agreed to go along because I was free anyway," he said. When they reached the lake shore, Sutton said the two had a small argument. "I told him not to go far, the ice was thin. He told me not to lecture him. We raised our voices. Then, he slipped." He paused, his hands clenching together. "I was just a few meters away. A second later, Tom lost his balance and fell onto the slanted ice surface. I rushed over, but he fell into the water. No one could survive in water that cold." Pike was silent for a few seconds, then asked, "Why didn't you call for rescue? Why didn't you report to the police?" Sutton bowed his head. "I panicked. I knew people would think I pushed him. I was scared. I left, taking a few of his things with me, the nylon bag, a canvas pouch. I dumped them near the pine forest, and went back to Cordova." The story sounded coherent, but to Pike, every detail contradicted the crime scene model. She opened the screen displaying the 3D map, pointing to the area Sutton said was thin ice. According to NOAA data from 1985, that area had ice thickness over 10 inches. It couldn't break from just a slip. "We've simulated it. It requires a light push for the victim to slide more than 3 meters and fall exactly into the weak ice zone. How do you explain that?" Sutton looked at the screen, silent. After a moment, he softly said, "I didn't push him, but maybe I got too close. He turned back, lost his balance, and fell." Pike continued asking about the 2 bags. "Why did you keep them instead of reporting to the police?" Sutton replied, I was afraid people would think I stole them. I just wanted the whole thing to sink away. I thought the snow would cover everything." That statement made Pike note it in her notebook, the same phrasing he had repeated in the first interrogation. Then she placed the photo from the film roll in front of him. "This photo was taken around 5:30 p.m., a few minutes before you say Reilly fell. In the right corner, there's a shadow of a person. The shape, height, and jacket match you. Do you have anything more to add?" Sutton looked at the photo, his eyes flickering briefly. "It could be me. I don't remember clearly, but I didn't harm him." Pike didn't respond, just opened another photo of the red jacket, labeled Sutton Auto 1985. Witness Harold Cole saw a person wearing a similar jacket, standing next to the red truck by the lake. "Can you explain why you were there, wearing this jacket, at the exact time Reilly disappeared?" Sutton leaned back in his chair, sighing. "I don't deny I was there. I said so. We argued. Then he fell. I don't know how to fix it." Pike nodded slightly, noting in the record, suspect admits presence at the scene and verbal conflict with the victim. Then she asked, "Do you know why your DNA appears on the adhesive tape found in the canvas pouch?" Sutton answered, "I cut my hand opening the cap of his camera. Blood got on it. I didn't do it on purpose." The answer plunged the room into silence. If he was telling the truth, that injury would have to be recorded in 1985 medical files, but there was none. Pike added a line, "Statement contradicts medical data, no injury report." As the interrogation dragged on for over 2 hours, Sutton gradually lost his composure. "What do you want me to say? That I pushed him? I didn't. He fell on his own. I just didn't want to be charged for an accident." His voice rose, his hands trembling on the table. Pike spoke softly, "You're not being charged for an accident. You're being charged for hiding the truth, for leaving, for disposing of evidence." Sutton fell silent, his eyes staring fixedly at the floor. The interrogation ended near midnight. In the summary record, Pike wrote, "Suspect admits presence at the scene, argument with the victim. Claims Reilly slipped and drowned in the lake. Admits to concealing evidence to avoid suspicion. Statement contradicts terrain simulation results and 1985 meteorological data." Outside, thin snow began falling on the Anchorage building roof. Pike looked through the window, recalling the image of Powder Creek Lake in the 3D model. A light push, a short slide, and 36 years of silence, buried under the ice. Now Glenn Sutton's statement, whether denied or justified, matched every detail with what science had proven. He had redrawn the picture that the snow of yesteryear had once tried to erase. In March 2022, nearly a year after Glenn Sutton's arrest, the Thomas Reilly investigation entered its final phase. Despite Sutton insisting that Reilly fell into the lake on his own, his statement suspiciously matched the crime scene model. Based on that, Nora Pike decided to launch the final search campaign to verify the location where Reilly fell. Based on the 3D simulation and statement, the forensics team pinpointed the South Shore area of Powder Creek Lake, where the ice was thin and sloped. In 1985, this area had been searched, but sonar technology back then was crude. This time, Pike coordinated with the Alaska State Troopers Underwater Forensics Unit, using high-frequency multibeam sonar capable of scanning details under the lake bottom. On March 14, the team deployed the sonar device from a specialized boat, scanning layers of the lake bottom mud. After several empty runs, the machine displayed a metal object about 80 centimeters long, buried more than 4 meters under the mud. The reflection pattern was uniform, not like a rock. The area was marked with coordinates and data sent back to the center. Pike stood still watching the screen, feeling like the past was surfacing from the cold water layer. 2 days later, an ROV robot with a camera was lowered down. The transmitted images showed a rusted metal frame, the body of a Nikon FE camera, the type Reilly often carried, lying next to a long bone segment. Continuing the expanded scan, they discovered scattered bone fragments along with personal items. Immediately, the area was cordoned off for excavation. For 4 straight days, the forensics team worked in freezing conditions. Each object fragment was suctioned from the mud, collected into specialized nets. They retrieved more than 30 bone fragments, a black leather belt, a Seiko watch face, and a piece of canvas pouch, matching the type found in 2019. All were sealed and transported to the Anchorage lab. When the final evidence crate was lifted from the water, Pike stood by the lake, silently watching the gray ripples. 36 years ago, this place was the starting point of a disappearance. Now it was the evidence ending a murder case. At the forensics lab, specialists reassembled the skeleton, extracting bone marrow for DNA testing. The reference sample was taken from Reilly's personal items stored since 1985. A week later, the results confirmed. DNA matched 99.99% with Thomas Reilly. The report also indicated rib bones with fractures consistent with the pushed-from-behind model. Everything matched the simulation data perfectly. In the internal press conference, Pike read the conclusion. The remains of Thomas Reilly were found at Powder Creek Lake, along with personal items. Injury marks indicate external impact. The case is determined to be homicide. The room fell silent. No one said anything, only the sound of fans and pens tapping on the table. After 36 years, they finally had irrefutable evidence. News spread across the state. Alaska media outlets ran headlines. Thomas Reilly's remains found after 37 years. Police confirm murder. In Cordova, those who knew Reilly gathered in front of the old ranger station, placing flowers and candles. Diana Marsh, his girlfriend from back then, sent a message of thanks. 36 winters have passed, and finally, you've been found. For Pike, this was not just closing a file, but proof that science could bring justice beyond time. In the report to the prosecutor, she listed the chain of evidence. Sutton's DNA matches evidence samples. Statement contradicts simulation data. 3D model determines a push force was needed for the victim to fall. Remains and personal items located exactly at the simulated position. The conclusion was concise. Based on all data, Thomas Reilly's death is classified as homicide, first-degree murder. On April 21, 2022, the Alaska State Troopers issued an official statement, closing the crime scene investigation phase. In the office, Pike stood looking at the Powder Creek map on the wall. The red dot marked estimated fall point remained in place, now circled and annotated with found 2022. She said nothing, just nodded slightly. After 36 years buried under the ice, Thomas Reilly had finally returned, bringing evidence confirming he didn't disappear, he was murdered. And with that discovery, Powder Creek snow finally stopped hiding the truth. In May 2022, after Thomas Reilly's remains were confirmed, investigator Nora Pike and the Anchorage District Prosecutor began the final phase, finalizing the prosecution file. This was no longer a disappearance or hypothesis, but a proven murder case, backed by a clear chain of scientific evidence, seamlessly connected across 3 decades. Pike spent many days compiling all documents, DNA results, crime scene models, photos recovered from the film roll, Sutton's contradictory statements, and evidence seized during the search. On the table, each photo was arranged in chronological order, forming a complete logical chain, from when Reilly left home to the discovery of the body. The summary report opened with the biological evidence section. Male DNA sample on the adhesive tape and red jacket matched absolutely with Glenn M. Sutton's DNA, with a random match probability of only 1 in 1 billion. This sample also matched DNA on the coffee cup seized in 2020, and fell within the Sutton lineage, confirmed by Parabon Nanolabs. No other DNA at the scene, proving only one man besides the victim was present at Powder Creek that afternoon. Next was visual evidence. The film roll recovered from the canvas pouch showed a red pickup truck, a 1980-1982 Ford F-Series type, matching the vehicle Sutton registered in Cordova in 1985.
Light analysis and meteorological data confirmed the photo was taken around 5:30 p.m., the time Reilly lost contact. The shadow person in the photo had an estimated height of 1m78, matching Sutton. These details were reconstructed by graphic experts into a 3D simulation frame for court presentation. The third section was statement evidence. In the interrogation, Sutton admitted being at the lake, admitted arguing with Reilly, but claimed the victim slipped and fell. His story completely contradicted the 1985 terrain model and meteorological data. The ice surface in that area was 10 inches thick, couldn't break without strong impact force. The fracture cracks on the victim's rib bones also proved a push from behind. The fourth section, physical evidence, seized from Sutton's home. Red jacket, Sutton Auto Workwear 1985, matching witness Harold Cole's description, with DNA matching the scene sample. Old leather notebook with the note 2/12, meet Tom. Camera, lake. Handwriting matched Sutton's signature in administrative records. .22 caliber handgun, with erased serial number, proving he had a history of illegally storing weapons, bolstering the argument that Sutton may have carried a gun when meeting Reilly. Pike arranged the evidence in the investigation timeline and marked it with a red diagram. At the center of the board was the name Glenn M. Sutton, connecting 4 branches: DNA, visuals, statement, physical evidence. All converged at one point. Powder Creek, February 12, 1985, 5:30 p.m. On June 1, 2022, the Alaska State Prosecution officially approved the preliminary indictment, charging Glenn M. Sutton with 2 counts: manslaughter, causing the death of Thomas Reilly through violent action leading to a fall into the lake; tampering with evidence, disposing of the victim's items, and leaving the scene without reporting. Prosecutor Karen Doyle, handling the case, wrote in the submission, "Defendant Sutton intentionally caused the death of Thomas Reilly, then concealed evidence to cover up the act. The chain of scientific evidence, including DNA, visuals, statements, and crime scene simulation, has eliminated all possibilities of accident." To strengthen the file, Pike prepared a detailed timeline for court. February 12, 1985, 5:30 p.m. Reilly meets Sutton at Powder Creek. Film roll photo records at 5:45 p.m. Victim pushed and falls onto the ice. 6:10 p.m. Sutton leaves the scene, taking items, then dumps them near the pine forest. July 9, 1985, Reilly's vehicle found, case noted as missing. 2018, 2019, DNA analysis, case reopened. 2021, Sutton arrested. 2022, body found, homicide confirmed. The document, over 300 pages long, was transferred to the federal prosecutor's office. A condensed 20-page version sent to the press, marking the case as Alaska's first successful cold case resolution using genealogical DNA, combined with crime scene simulation. On June 15, in a short meeting, Pike and Prosecutor Doyle reviewed the entire file. Doyle said, "We have a complete story, every detail fits. Even without a direct eyewitness, all the scientific evidence has spoken for us." Pike just nodded. She knew this case wouldn't stop at charges, it would become legal precedent for other missing persons files. A week later, the indictment was announced to the media. Press ran big headlines: Glenn Sutton indicted for manslaughter, 1985 cold case, officially closed. Outside the Anchorage courthouse, summer snow fell sporadically, wind from Cook Inlet, carrying skin-cutting cold. When signing the final record, Pike felt a strange quiet. On her desk was the restored photo from the film roll, the red truck by Powder Creek Lake. That photo, once a faint clue, was now the most crucial piece of incriminating evidence. She wrote the closing line in the report: "Every piece fits." The 37-year journey of the Thomas Reilly case closes with the truth, and justice, though late, has finally arrived.
Early in 2023, Nearly 40 years after the disappearance at Power Creek, Glenn M. Sutton was brought to trial at the Anchorage Superior Court. In a file thick with hundreds of pages, prosecutor Karen Doyle and investigator Nora Pike had prepared thoroughly DNA results, photos from the film roll, a 3D crime scene model, testimonies, and physical evidence. It was the entire journey spanning nearly 4 decades, now presented in court. The trial opened on the morning of February 3, 2023. Sutton, 76 years old, appeared in a gray sweater, his face impassive. Right at the opening, defense attorney Edward Rankin immediately objected to the use of the DNA sample obtained from a discarded coffee cup, claiming that the police had violated privacy rights protected by the Fourth Amendment. He said, "My client never consented to providing a biological sample. DNA obtained from personal items is illegal." The prosecution countered with the precedent from California v. Greenwood, 1988, asserting that items discarded in public places are no longer protected by privacy rights. Doyle stated firmly, "The coffee cup was thrown into a public trash can. The recovery was legal." After 2 days of arguments, Judge Ellen Markovitz declared, "The court accepts the DNA sample as evidence." The sampling procedure was legal. This decision brought a sigh of relief from Pike. She knew that if the DNA were excluded, the case would collapse. Once the arguments concluded, the prosecution presented the chain of investigation. In the hushed courtroom, a large screen displayed images of Power Creek in the winter of 1985, Reilly's Ford car stuck in the snow, the Sutton Auto nylon bag, the film roll found in the melting ice in 2019, and the matching DNA results from 2020. Next, the 3D model recreated the scuffle and the fall onto the thin ice, leaving many jurors speechless. Nora Pike was called to the stand as a witness, recounting the investigation journey. "There is no data indicating a natural accident. There was only a strong push that caused Reilly to fall into the lake. All the evidence, DNA, photos, testimonies, points to Glenn Sutton," she said. Defense attorney Rankin counterattacked, asserting no direct eyewitness, no murder weapon, suggesting Reilly might have fallen on his own. He described Sutton as a misunderstood old man cornered by memory and time. However, prosecutor Doyle presented a series of rebuttal evidence, photos from the film roll showing Sutton's car, conflicting testimonies, a notebook note, "Meet Tom," camera, lake, and DNA matches on 3 pieces of evidence. Witness Harold Cole, a former ranger, was called to the stand. When Doyle asked, he pointed directly at Sutton. "I saw him at Power Creek that day. Red jacket, red car, I didn't mistake him." Rankin tried to counter that visibility in the snowstorm made identification uncertain, but Cole replied curtly, "Only he had that jacket." At the end of the session, the prosecution showed a video simulation of the scene. The lights in the room dimmed, and the screen displayed a man being lightly pushed, sliding far, then falling through the broken ice. The sound of hitting the water echoed, leaving the courtroom in absolute silence. When the images ended, Doyle simply said, "That's exactly what happened at Power Creek, February 12, 1985. In the closing arguments, Doyle looked straight at the jury. "No snow can bury the truth forever." Glenn Sutton pushed Thomas Reilly and walked away, leaving behind DNA, the car, and lies. "Today, the truth has finally spoken." Rankin responded briefly, "This is a case without witnesses, without a weapon, only speculation from technology." On March 2, 2023, the 12-person jury began deliberations. After nearly 10 hours, they returned to the courtroom. The foreman stood up, his voice firm. "On the charge of manslaughter, guilty. On the charge of tampering with evidence, guilty." Sutton showed no reaction, only bowed his head, his hands clenched tightly. Judge Markovitz declared, "The court recognizes the jury's verdict. Defendant Glenn M. Sutton is convicted of manslaughter and tampering with evidence." The sentencing date was set for next month. As the court adjourned, Nora Pike stepped into the hallway, where snow was falling heavily. She stood watching the snowflakes slowly falling onto the stone steps. The feeling was not victory, but the quiet after a long journey. Justice, though, arriving more than 37 years late, had finally come to Thomas Reilly. The next morning, Alaska newspapers reported uniformly, jury convicts Glenn Sutton, 1985, Powder Creek case closed. Below was a black and white photo of Reilly, with his old Nikon camera. The short caption, 37 years later, the truth is unearthed from the ice. On April 28, 2023, the Anchorage Superior Court opened the sentencing hearing for Glenn M. Sutton, concluding the legal journey, spanning nearly 4 decades. The courtroom that day was unusually quiet. Outside, the last snow of the season fell sporadically through the windows, casting cold light on the defendant's aged face. Sutton sat motionless in his chair, hands placed on his chest, his expression calm to the point of coldness. Judge Ellen Markovitz opened the session by summarizing the entire trial process, from the absolute DNA match results, the 3D model proving external force, to the defendant's conflicting testimonies and concealment of evidence. She spoke slowly. Scientific evidence and field investigation have proven that Glenn M. Sutton was present at the scene, caused the death of Thomas Reilly, and intentionally concealed the truth for 37 years. The prosecution requested a 30-year prison sentence, while the defense attorney pleaded for leniency, citing advanced age, poor health, and Sutton's partial cooperation during the investigation. After deliberation, the judge issued the final decision. Pursuant to the Alaska Criminal Code, defendant Glenn M. Sutton is sentenced to 25 years in prison, with no parole for the first 15 years. The evidence tampering conduct is merged into the main sentence. Judge Markovitz paused, looking toward the audience seats, where Diana Marsh, Reilly's girlfriend from back then, sat silently with a small photo in her hand. The court acknowledges the loss of the victim's family and friends. Although justice arrived late, today the truth has been proven by science and perseverance. When the judge finished reading, Sutton remained silent. He only looked straight ahead, his eyes empty. The officer standing behind placed a hand on his shoulder, signaling him to stand. He nodded slightly and walked slowly. The courtroom door closed, leaving only the scratching of pens on the sentencing record. After the hearing, the Alaska State Prosecutor's Office held a short press conference. Prosecutor Karen Doyle stated, "This is the longest cold case in Alaska history solved through genetic genealogy technology. It affirms that science can bring justice beyond time." Investigator Nora Pike stood quietly behind the podium, her face unable to hide her emotion. 5 years earlier, she had only been assigned to review old files in the archives. Today, her investigation results had become a statewide legal precedent. The press called it the 21st century DNA investigation standard, a model combining science, technology, and traditional investigation. In the following months, the Alaska State Police issued standard procedures for cold case investigations, based on the Reilly case, including long-term evidence preservation, coordination with genealogy labs, and use of 3D terrain simulations to reconstruct scenes. The Powder Creek Protocol document, compiled by Nora Pike, became the official training curriculum for investigative units across the state. In mid-June, the Anchorage Daily News published an editorial titled, "From Cold Snow to Justice, The Legacy of the Powder Creek Case." The article affirmed that the Reilly case not only brought legal results, but also changed how Alaska approaches decades-long missing persons cases. In the conclusion, the author wrote, "No crime is buried forever under the ice. When science and perseverance meet, the truth always finds its way back." As for Nora Pike, she declined interviews, leaving only one sentence in an internal statement: "I didn't solve this case alone. It was the data, the scraps of paper, and even the silence of the past 37 years that led us here." That summer, in Cordova, a small plaque was placed by the shore of Powder Creek Lake, inscribed, "Thomas Reilly, 1941-1985. Returned from the snow." The ceremony had only a few old friends, a few young rangers, and Nora Pike, She placed a sprig of lily of the valley by the plaque, then looked out at the calm lake surface, where it all began. The Powell Creek case officially closed, but its impact spread throughout Alaska's justice system. The court's final report noted, successfully solved through genetic genealogy methods, terrain simulation analysis, and independent witness investigation. The Reilly case is recognized as the longest cold case in state history, resolved by genetic technology. As she left Cordova, Nora turned to look at the distant fog-shrouded mountains. Alaska summers are rarely warm, but that day, faint sunlight shone down on the lake surface. She whispered softly, as if to herself, "Justice may arrive late, but it always has its own path." In the spring of 2024, nearly 40 years since Thomas Reilly vanished amid the white snows of Cordova, the Alaska Cold Case Unit completed a comprehensive report over 600 pages thick, the final document, closing the Powell Creek case. Inside, every phase was detailed from the initial search in 1985, the case frozen for 3 decades, to the reinvestigation, arrest and trial of Glenn M. Sutton. Each page bore the marks of time, but also testified to the progress of forensic science and the perseverance of those who refused to give up. Investigator Nora Pike was the one who signed the last page of the file. In the conclusion, she wrote briefly, "The Powell Creek case is complete. All physical forensic evidence and testimonies have been verified. The Thomas Reilly file is officially closed, confirming the victim's death due to the intentional actions of Glenn M. Sutton. Justice has been served." The report not only synthesized the investigation journey, but also became a statewide guide, a model for modern cold case investigations. In the appendix, Pike's team outlined the standard procedures: long-term evidence preservation, collaboration with DNA genealogy labs, scene reconstruction via 3D simulations, and cross-referencing historical meteorological data. This set of documents later became known in the field by the familiar name, Powell Creek Framework. In April of that year, in Anchorage, the Alaska Department of Justice held a small ceremony recognizing the contributions of those involved. In his speech, the Cold Case Unit director said, "The Reilly case didn't just close an old file, it opened a new direction for the entire investigative force. When science and tenacity meet, no secret lasts forever under the ice." Nora Pike received an honorary commendation, but she only smiled humbly. When asked about her final feelings, she replied, "The most important thing is that we brought a person back, not with life, but with the truth." After the ceremony, she returned to Cordova, where it all began. The road leading into Powell Creek Trail had now been cleared, with a small memorial sign erected, "In memory of Thomas Reilly, Justice Found, 2023. Simple words, etched into thin steel, reflecting the faint spring sunlight. Pike paused by the lake, where the last seasonal snow was melting away. The water was clear blue, rippling lightly, the surface reflecting the golden light of the afternoon. The spot where the canvas bag was found, years ago now, held only moss and pebbles. No trace of the cold remained, only warm, still air. She gently placed her hand on the water, feeling the chill spread through her fingertips, a belated farewell. In the Anchorage archives, the Reilly file was placed in the closed cases, solved by genetic genealogy section, labeled red, coded PC85R, below it read in small letters, closed April 2024. The archive lights gradually dimmed, leaving a single point of light reflecting on the file cover, like the early morning light on Powell Creek Lake. The Cold Case Unit's final report ended with a summary paragraph. From 1985 to 2024, the Thomas Reilly case spanned 39 years of investigation, through 4 generations of officers and various technologies. Solving it via genetic genealogy established Alaska's first legal precedent in tracing crimes through genetics. Powell Creek Lake, once covered in ice and snow, now becomes a symbol of justice illuminated. In May, the ice on the lake
melted completely. Sunlight shone on the water, reflecting through the trees along the shore, creating a shimmering band like an old metal streak, newly polished. Nora Pike silently watched the scene, recalling it all: the snow-stuck Ford car, the Sutton auto, nylon bag, the blood-dried bandage, and the blurry photo, with the red car, every piece of a story that had ended. A light wind blew, carrying moisture from the water. In the thin mist, Powder Creek Lake sparkled like a mirror, reflecting the brilliant afternoon light, a light symbolizing justice, the truth found, after 39 years buried under the ice. At the lake's corner, the memorial plaque was inscribed simply with 3 words: "Justice restored."
Looking at the Powder Creek case, the lesson for American life today is not just justice will come, but justice requires us to proactively nurture it every day with discipline, knowledge, and civic responsibility. The small details that turned the entire case around: a Sutton auto nylon bag blown by the wind, a rotten 35mm film roll, a blood-stained Band-Aid, a note "Meet Tom," camera, lake, to the coffee cup Sutton threw in the trash, remind us not to underestimate small things. Storing receipts, old photos, messages, GPS data, or dashcam can save a case many years later. Technology helps us advance, but we must understand the law. DNA from items discarded in public places is accepted by the court. Greenwood precedent, so teach our children the boundaries of privacy rights and responsibility. At the same time, when using consumer genetic testing services, read the terms carefully about sharing data with law enforcement to balance personal rights and community benefits. 3D terrain simulations and NOAA data show that just a light push killed someone in life. Small violence or small threats can escalate. Report conflicts early and seek mediation support hotlines instead of letting the snow cover it up. Nora Pike's persistence reminds us, don't hesitate to pursue the right process: note-taking, obtaining warrants, preserving evidence, because good procedures protect both victims and defendants, and make jury verdicts solid. Finally, support budgets for cold case units, participate in volunteer search programs, and build a culture of remembrance, erecting memorials, retelling stories in schools, so the community understands that every name, like Thomas Reilly, deserves to have the truth uncovered. When each person holds a small piece, the light on the surface of Powder Creek Lake has a chance to reflect into justice. Thank you for following to the end of the justice journey of the Powder Creek case, where the truth was found after nearly 40 years buried under Alaska's cold ice. Please subscribe to the channel to join me in continuing to explore other cold cases, where every fragment of memory and tiny trace can illuminate the light of justice.